Welcome to another interview for the Task Management and Time Blocking Summit 2022. Today, I'm going to have the luxury to talk to Charlie Gilkey. And Charlie helps people start finishing the stuff that matters. He's the founder of Productive Flourishing, author of the book Start Finishing, and the Small Business Life Cycle. He's a host on the Productivity Flourishing podcast. And before starting Productive Flourishing, that I remember that, okay, Charlie works and joined the Force Military Logistic Coordinator while simultaneously pursuing a PhD in philosophy. He lives with his wife, Angela, in Portland, Oregon. Did I miss anything?
I don't
Hopefully
think you
not.
did, Augusto. It's
Welcome,
great to be
Charlie.
here.
So it is really a luxury to have you here for the Task Management and Time Blocking Summit. Um, for the people who have been reading many years, Productive Flourishing is a luxury. So thank you for all the work you're doing there. And let's begin with that. But one of the things that for so many people is really interesting about Productive Flourishing is that it's not only the content, the quality of the content, but it's the fact that you, as well as the people who collaborate over time with you, are eating the dog food, for saying it in plainful words. It's not like, oh, well, this is the framework, this is what we write, this is what we do. No. This, whatever is there on words, it's something that you do. And even if you have been a long time reader, you even could see the evolution from things that used to work or you thought maybe were going to work to things that are not working anymore. And I tell people often, it's not only important to know what works right now, but also be aware that certain things will stop working and it is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start there, on because again, that is a big thing for me. And I know for many of the people who will look this interview, what things have worked and stopped working in this world for you of task management and time blocking.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that because for me, productive flourishing and my total body of work, which includes sort of the work I do in conscious business and leadership, is all um, a continual exploration because our context continually change. And when your context change, your techniques need to change to meet the moment. However, what often doesn't change though are principles. And so that's why so much of productive flourishing is grounded on certain principles. And then sometimes unhelpfully, Augusto, I'd be like, here's the principle. How does that work for you? And the readers, listeners often like, well, just tell me how it works. It's like, I don't know your context, right? What I might, for instance, what I've really gotten into recently is which of the principles most need to be modified when you think about people who have neurodivergence, whether it's ADHD, whether it's autism, whether it's synesthesia. Some of the principles, the tried and true ones, they work, but they need to be modified in a way. So for instance, some people with ADHD need an excess, what would seem to those of us who are neurotypical as an excess of stimuli to be able to focus. And it's counterintuitive because all of the flashing things, all of the different font changes, all of those type of things helps them focus. Whereas if they just look at a minimal screen that works for us, or they just look at a block of words, they can't get grip. So what I would say on this was when I start talking to focus blocks about people who have, say, that going on, have ADHD or know that about themselves, I'm like, okay, you still need a focus block. You still need 90 to 120 minutes of working. But how you generate that for yourself is different. So for me, I got to block everything out. I got to put on some headphones. I have to listen to classical music. I have to get stuff off my desk for everything to calm down so I can focus. That's the exact opposite of what some people who have ADHD need to do. That's all good. And so what I would say has changed is, one, really understanding neurodivergence and embracing that and not shaming people for having that. There's been enough of that happening in the productivity literature. I don't want to participate in that. Two, acknowledging really that productivity for the longest time had been written by certain people who have certain types of jobs. And more of us are gig workers, flex workers. We have 3 or 4 part-time side hustle things. And some of those tools don't work as well.
Correct.
Technology. You can't talk about productivity over the last 15 years, the changes in productivity, unless you talk about technology. I was thinking about this because so much of my current explorations for my own personal productivity has been thinking about the ecosystem of devices that I use and why I use what. When I got started thinking about a lot of this stuff in 2005, we didn't even have iPhones at the time, right? And so this whole idea of a device ecosystem where you have a focus device here, you have a calm device there, you have a main computer here, wasn't really on deck to nearly the degree
they were
that it is right
big
now.
and big, expensive, and heavy.
They were big, expensive, and heavy. So, Augusto, I think we're both in the age group where we remember that using a computer, you used to write longhand for writers. I'll talk about writing. You used to write longhand in a notebook or somewhere else. Go to a computer, type it out, save it, hit print, give it to whoever needed. And that was how you used a computer outside of gaming. That was it. They weren't ubiquitous devices in our pocket. Like I joke, Augusto, that where we are right now as a species is we're already cyborgs. We're just really ineffective, right? We're really inefficient. Like most of us are at the point to where our phones and computers are our outboard memory. And without them, we can't remember anything anymore.
We are exactly there. I completely agree with you. And the problem is the transition. It was really unfair to humans. And I have argued that in the past, where if you go, back pre-computers, it was when the first computers came, as you said, they were slow. They were not that great. So you did really specific task. This task need to be done in the computer, but everything else could be done or could be held outside of that. The chip evolution went so fast that most people is not even aware that they already are behind the curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you think on the first PDAs had 4 functions: calendar, context, task, and notes. That's what a Palm Pilot did. That's what a Sony did at the beginning, etc. When you look at the iPhone that you just mentioned, okay, those not even goes to the bottom. Those 4 applications don't go in the bottom. The problem with personal productivity is that we not needed to use the computer or do it for really specific things to be, as you mentioned it, our external memory, without the techniques or the work, and we got sold into the idea of, because it's in the computer, it's easy to find.
Yeah, well, exactly. I sometimes go on this riff, especially if I'm doing any sort of workplace consulting and things like that. I'm like, hey, in the audience, raise your hand if someone taught you how to use email. Right? Most hands don't go up.
I agree.
It just slid on us, right? Most people haven't had a course on effective business writing in fractured media.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We might know how to write a memo, but we don't know how to write an effective email because no one's trained us. Right? And so when we start talking about very basic principles of inbox management techniques, all those types of things, why that came up in the 2006 to 2012 timeframe is because we reached a level of cultural understanding that this technology we have upon us is something we haven't learned how to use, and we're using it poorly, and it's making work in our lives worse. And right as soon as we were getting our arms wrapped around email, some of us, Slack hit us, social media hit us, Discord, Zoom meetings popped out of nowhere, right? And so all of this, I agree. We are, when you look at the changes in COVID-19, but even before that, like we have not had this level of work and knowledge and sort of, I was going to say knowledge worker, but that didn't exist. Work and skills disruption since World War II. That's how
And
long
you
it's been.
mentioned Zoom, and I tell people, well, this is the problem. Before 2019, so December 2019 and before, most people, when you say Zoom, that seems like, okay, that need to be something important, big. Okay, that's only the ones. No, give me a call. After March 2020, and again, that's 90 days. It's not a long time. It's not even after March 2020. Everybody was like, if you tell people, customers of yours, I'm sure this happened similar to you, or I would be curious, who were fine giving you a phone call or were fine doing it into a phone call. Now it's like, no, Charlie, let's do a Zoom call. And it went from having X number of Zooms, little, per week, to now every other call, or every call almost, is a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. And nowhere, I know we're talking high level here, but Friday the 13th of March, 2020, like never until maybe World War II, right? Way back then, has there been a day that's defined a shift in work as that. That's when a lot of the things started locking down. So we remember that day. It's like that day and 9/11, and we can go back in recent days of like days that changed the world, and that one was the way it changed the world of work. And yeah, it's absolutely that case. I love. I think it was Jason who said it from Basecamp. Like when you think about Slack, I'm paraphrasing here. Slack is an all-day meeting without an agenda. Right.
You see, now you give me homework, because I am I don't like a Slack, and I have never been able to put good words. Why? Now you just give me a quote that I need to search and I start throwing everywhere.
Yeah, this is why they don't embrace Slack, and they have the campfire in their products and things like that. And there's a lot of truth to it, right? In that, so much for our team training and so much of what I'm telling our team of PEF, which is now about 10 people, is like, look, I do not intend, and we do not intend, for Slack to be an instant messenger, right? We do not intend a little green light to mean that you're instantly available, you have to respond and everything like that. Mm-hmm. As much as we can get out, have some focus time, things can sit. Nothing we've done, including sort of the projects we're working on with momentum and things like that. Like, we have never built a business on urgency that really has that urgency. I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not in the military anymore. Most things can wait. However, the technology that we have suggests instantaneous. It suggests ubiquitous, evergreen access. And that is killing my, I think it's not killing, well, it is killing my team's productivity, but collectively, we're at the point that not only are we worried about email as this other external channel, but now we're worried about Slack too. And we have to look at our phones because people will text us there. Depending upon your workplace, you might have that workplace where it's job security for me, but I hate that it's for other people. But it's like the protocol is, if they Slack you and then don't hear from you in like 30 minutes, then they text you to make sure that you got it. And I'm like, and what you're bugging them about is something that's going to require focused work. They need time to think and to write and create and do the stuff. And they can't do it because as soon as they get 20 minutes to do it, someone's pinging them about something. That's the world we live in right now.
Correct. And I'm going to bring the quote. Jason Fritz said on Twitter, at least on February 18, 2016, "What would you call an all-day meeting with unknown participants and no agenda?" And he made the disclaimer later, it's not just a Slack. It's a Slack. Slack is just an implementation. It's any group chat tool. Is the medium, not the product. And I agree. We are in the problem. This is one of the big challenge for time blocking. Is fine. I will block this hour to have this interview, but there is a significant amount of people afraid of get their devices, okay, whatever it is, into do not disturb, so they can really use time blocking. The problem, again, is not the medium. It's not time blocking.
Yeah.
It's not as it was not task management. It is the fear that people have to turn off communication. I remember the first time I wrote that I do not check email on my phone. And people's like, what do you mean you don't have chicken? I don't have email on my phone. Sorry. I have an iPad that has data. And when I'm going to check email, that's what I will pull and that's what I will work. When I wrote later on, you need to earn, I think it's something like, you need to earn the right to make noise on my phone. And by default, my phone do not vibrate, do not. So if I have in my phone and you happen to call and you have not earned that right, the phone will notify me. Other than that, there is this beautiful tool called voicemail where you can leave there. And you earn that right to make noise.
Yeah.
Period.
I'm with you on that one. That's what I
But people's
mentioned earlier.
terrified of that.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I sort of slid that in, like calm devices versus connected devices.
Yep.
And so as I'm thinking about things, I'll probably do some YouTube videos on this and later, but like I start to separate what are calm devices and what are connected devices. And I used to be the same way, Augusto, where it's like my phone was a calm device.
Mhm.
And that way, but I recently, over the last couple of years, 2-3 years, I've changed that so that my phone is a connected device. But the thing about it is, I don't have it with me when I need to be calm. Right. I use it for its intended. I use it for that purpose, and I've anchored functions to the phone. So if I have my phone on me, it's likely that I am in a connected mode. Otherwise, like my Apple Watch, nothing goes through. Right. It's a calm device. My iPad mini set up to be a calm device. Right. My iPad Pro, different use case, calm device. My computer, connected device. Right? Because that's the way that I interact with those things. But it's very intentional use of technology. And I think that's what we're needing to learn is how do we be intentional with these tools based upon my priorities, my goals, and the real values in my life, right? I have accepted that I'm going to be, by other people's standards, acceptably mediocre when it comes to getting back to them on time and answering emails and things like that. That's not what I'm optimized for. I'm not going to spend my days trying to email someone back after they've emailed me 30 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. It can sit for a few days. However, when I respond, or if I'm on this meeting with you, I'm 100% here. That's what I'm optimizing for, presence and effectiveness. And I can't optimize for everything, right? And I know that works for me as a small business owner and what I teach and my business. I get to make a lot of those decisions, but that's how I want my team to do as well.
But you make two important distinctions that I want to come back. One is you can't optimize for everything. And, as Francis Wade, the organizer of the summit, will said on his podcast, this should have a ring bell. You see, now I'm getting to understand his concept of the bell, because I agree. Doesn't matter if you work on a Fortune 500 or in a small business, or you have 17 little gigs. What are you optimizing for? And I'm like you. And once you define that, then you come to an interesting problem, and it's how you communicate that. So customers, no, the problem is not that you respond or don't respond to me on time. The problem is, what are you optimized for and what I'm expecting you to be optimized for. But that's now something that we can manage. Because if I know you are optimized for X and you can send that message to me, then I can now really give you or expect what is going to happen. So that is important. The second part, I love the connective versus calm. What's what you said
calm
on the device?
Versus connected technology.
That is a super interesting concept. I have not put it that way, so you will be quoted into that one, because I think it's brilliant. It is. I have never conscious make it that way, but you describe it exactly as I have it. My iPad mini and my phone are calm devices. My iPad Pro, that is my main device, that is a connect device. It has data, it beeps, it rings, it shines, everything. But when I need calm, that thing stays behind in the office, and you will see me just walk with the iPad mini. But again, that comes to these two concepts comes, from my perspective, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, to a really important principle, courage. Because now you are going to go against what most people will go. Okay, when you say I'm not going to optimize for everything, people will look at you and say, "What do you mean? You can pick what you can be optimized for." Number one, and when you say, "No, no, these devices are connected, these devices are calm," again, you are going to you are taking a counterintuitive approach for most people, at least.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
how do you bring that to, since you bring the two concepts, how do you bring that forward? How do you explain that concept, not from you, but from your client perspective? How do you teach those two concepts so they can push it forward?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways about this. So I have the gift of gab, and I'm a writer and author and thinker. And so
Mhm.
by the time I get to the place where I could say something like this is a calm device and this is a connected device, I've thought about it for 4 or 5 years. And like, how do I explain this? How do I get there? Because for me, it wasn't like I didn't have that schema, that mental model to understand how I was buying things. And so
Mhm.
even for things like I have a remarkable tablet here, and people are always like, you can do the same thing on an iPad. I'm like, first off, use them both. But second off, that's a calm device. I only use that when I'm thinking or when I'm taking notes on clients or when I'm doing my morning writing. Use the iPad for different things, right? I'm going to pause here. And unfortunately, I don't have the reference off the top of my head, but that when I was writing Start Finishing, I was reading a lot of research on the human technology interactions. And I remember
Mhm.
reading about one of the experiments that they had with primates. I think it was monkeys, and it's gruesome, but they cut the hand off monkeys and put a hammer on the hand. And what was found is that the monkey's brain would start to rewire to optimize for hammering because that's what the hand did, right? Gruesome. But I thought about like our physiology, our neurology, and realized that we've done that without cutting our hands off. Every time you reach for a certain device, the parts of your brain that use that device start firing on their own. We are not making the conscious decisions. Like people are fighting with their technology, and they think if I just had different discipline, if I just had no, your brain is literally saying phone this. And I do this like I didn't know we were going here. I would have prepped for it, but a lot of times when I'm talking about Start Finishing and distractions and technology, I'll say, look, everybody. So we'll do this here. If you're watching this, close your eyes. Think about your connected device, whatever that is. Think about your phone for most of you. If you have your phone, pick it up. Notice what your hands start doing automatically. Notice where your attention immediately goes as soon as you think about or you touch that device. I didn't prime you thinking about or touching that. I just said touch it. But if you're always going to Instagram when you pick up your phone, your brain makes that, because brains, like most things, optimize for efficiency and ease. So your brain automatically preloads all the things you do. So you pick up the phone to call your mom, but you're on Instagram. You can approach that as what's wrong with me and my willpower and my focus. I don't think that's very useful. What you can instead say is, I have primed and habituated myself to use this device this way. The only way out of this is to habituate myself to use it a different way. How do I get my choice architecture set up so that it does that? So for instance, on my phone, my first screen are all of my calmer technologies like Mailbrew, Kindle, audiobooks, things like that on my first screen, because that means that I have to consciously choose to go to my second and third screen to do something, right? Just that little bit of friction will be like, I'll flip and be like, wait a second, that's stop. That's not what I need to be doing right now. So we have to, in this world that we live in, where devices come at us and we just adopt things, approach and say, whether I'm adopting a new technology, like a remarkable pad, or I'm looking at my current technology, how do I set it up so that it works for me with as little choice as possible? Because if I have to choose in the moment how to use this every time, I'm likely going to go to the thing that's urgent and easy. which is unlikely the thing that's going to matter most at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And so, as we talk about time blocking and different things like that, and the way I talk about it, there's a focus block, which is a 90 to 120 minute block of time. And oftentimes I'll tell people, unless you're of the type to where you need that sensation, again, I talked about ADHD piece, but a lot of us, the very best thing we can do is actually remove the phones and connected devices from us completely. There's been plenty of studies that show that just having your phone, your mobile phone, in the room with you decreases cognitive performance. It doesn't have to be doing anything, just that it's there. So that's why my phone is currently not in my office. I got a banister that comes into my office. I leave it outside the office, come into my office, do what I need to do. If I need to make a phone call, something happens, I take 6 steps, make the phone call, come back in the room, make the phone call, walk the phone back, set it on the ledge. I'm back at work doing whatever I'm doing on this device in this context. So for focus blocks, that's where you have to be super, super clear that you set up your technology, you set up your environment to cultivate the habits, to cultivate the practices that you want to be in, not the reverse. What most people will do is they'll have a distracting environment and then enter that environment and try to focus. Mm-hmm. That, y'all, is the hard way to do this. It's incredibly hard because of, we have to remember, we are creatures. We are primates first, right? All animals, including humans, are incredibly attuned to their environment, and our environment has much more sway over our actual behaviors than most people go. And this is why I go through that. Like when people are like, I want to work out, I want to do things. I'm like, so here's your rule. Put your shoes on and go to the gym. No one gets to the gym and says, you know what? I'm not going to do anything today. Sometimes we do when you're really not feeling it.
And that's fine.
But most of the time, if you're in that environment, you're going to do the thing that is done in that environment. This is why we don't take burritos in the bathroom. Most of us don't, right? That's not what you do in the bathroom, right? You don't eat burritos in the bathroom for most of us, right? We know that's intuitively wrong. No. And my wife and I have agreed since 2004 or so that we don't have connected devices, what we now call connected devices, in our bedroom. There are no TVs. There are no phones. There are no radios. None of that. Because that's not what we do there. That's not what that room is for, right? We have other rooms that have that in there. So when I carry my phone into the bedroom, it feels as wrong as carrying a burrito in the bathroom.
Right.
It's like, ooh, not what I do here. I'm going to leave it on the banister, or I'm going to take this device, or I'm going to go like, okay, maybe I wanted to listen to an audiobook. That's why I have an iPad mini, right? That's why I can listen, put my AirPods in and listen from my phone on my watch. I don't have to have the phone on me to do the consumption. That's important. So I think as people think about time blocking, right, there are different ways of doing this, but I want people to really think about space, place, and time, right? Because if you slam a focus block, so real quick, I'll just share it real quick. I talk about 4 different focus blocks, or 4 different kinds of blocks, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. Focus blocks, I already talked about. That's where you do your deep work or your focus work or something that it takes a while for you to get into and figure out. So many people think focus blocks are just about cognitive work, like, knowledge work and things like that. It is. But if you've had that closet of doom that you haven't been able to organize and sort for a while, you need a few focus blocks for that. If, you need to plan how you're going to do your backyard, that's that. If you need to fix something and tear it apart and put it back together, probably a focus block. So you have to have enough of those to fuel the things that matter. And you have to know this type of work is going to require certain types of focus blocks. So that's 1. 2 are social blocks. Depending upon your work context, that could be interviews like this one. It could be work meetings. It could be hanging out with friends, whatever it is. And we have different, between introverts, ambiverts, and extroverts, we have different quotients about how much people time we need to feed our soul, but how much people time we need to feed our work. And we have to balance that. And again, this is a principle because we all have a certain amount of social time that we need for our souls and for our work. Your practice listening to this is figuring out how much is right for you. Third block, admin blocks. Oh, sorry. Social blocks tend to be about the same amount of time as focus blocks. So 90 to 120 minutes. And people are always going to say this. I'm going to say it, Augusto. They're like, but most meetings are an hour. Okay. But think about the prep before a meeting and think about what happens after the meeting.
That's correct. Because most people, I tell a lot of the example of the laundry. And I always tell people, how long is laundry? 20 minutes? No. Collecting is 20 minutes. Put in the laundry. Now you have to wait half an hour. Okay. Moving that thing is another 5 minutes. Then you need to wait 45 minutes. And then you need to fold. And that is the reason people wonders why I have piles of laundry. Oh, because their time block is wrong.
Yeah, well, they have piles of email.
Same
because
reason.
They've scheduled themselves back to back to back all week, and they get to Friday and they have all of the spillage, the follow-ups, everything like that they haven't planned for. They just plan for the meeting. But if you plan for them to be 90, 120 minutes and you're real about that as they're happening, you can prep for a meeting. So before this interview with Augusto, I did some prep, right? Showed up. After this meeting, I know there's going to be some things I'm going to need to give the team, maybe follow up with Augusto, things like that. I know that's baked in. So my choices are just to bake it into when I plan the meeting or have it sit on my brain for 3 or 4 days until I find that, unicorn open moment where I can remember all the things I was supposed to email Augusto. I tell you, that is not going to happen. I'm going to forget. I'm going to feel like I'm going to forget. Here's what will happen in Charlie's world. I'll be like, I'll get back to Augusto. 3 days later, I haven't gotten back to him, but the weekend comes and then I get involved in some other stuff. And so then it's the end of next Friday, but then I start feeling ashamed because I haven't gotten back to him yet about whatever he needs to do. And I know he's on schedule, but because I'm ashamed, I'm like, how do I, right? And then it's one of those awkward emails where it's like, do I start with acknowledging that I'm behind? So I think about it for a few more days, and then all of a sudden I'm 3 weeks behind. It sounds idiotic, perhaps, but this is what happens to us.
Okay. And I always say the problem is not the 3 weeks. The 3 weeks is the least of your problems. The problem is your brain in those 3 weeks is using cycles telling, hey, Charlie, you said 2 days. And now it's 2 days ago, and now it's at 3 days ago, and 4 days ago, and as that is commence collecting stress and everything else, and it gets worse. But let me go back to that part because you said something here in my notes really key about the devices that you're explaining much better than what I have ever explained. So thank you, because people ask me often why this interview we are recording on an Android tablet. Okay? And people have asked me why the guy who wrote the iPad only book, who live on iPads, who have more than one iPad, use an Android for recording. And the reason is because I don't do anything on this thing other than connect it to a microphone. So it's always ready. I don't need to set up. I don't need to be concerned about, let me see what I need to deactivate so it doesn't pop up or ring or sound as I'm talking to Charlie. If I'm talking on this device, this is the only thing happen on this device. And I get it. I get it that I have the luxury to have more than one device, or more than I'm going to admit that I have in my office. Okay. But the reason is exactly what you said, is I begin with browsers, and I begin using a browser for work and a browser to play. And I never told, you cannot play on working hours. No. What I was not allowed to do was going and play on Google Chrome, because that was a work one. So I needed to open Safari and I could play all that I wanted. But it was what you said. The brain immediately, as soon as I open Safari to this day, the brain don't think, what I'm going to do for work, what kind of way I need to engage. He knows it's playtime. And it's great. If I open Chrome, it's exactly the opposite. So even I have things now for clients that I only do on a Microsoft Edge. Why? Same reason. Is the brain, I don't need to think. I don't need to go and make the effort. What is what I'm going to do? And if I'm tired, I don't need the brain don't need to say, oh well, are we playing? Are we
Mhm.
doing client work? What is what we're doing? The brain knows immediately. And I get it. I do it in a more expensive way, but it can be done. Create profiles. You can create profiles in Windows, in Mac, doesn't matter,
Yeah.
and have it that way. Because as you said, the more you give the right clues to the brain, the less effort it will take to you to get there. When we
Yeah.
talk about weekly review, as a big GTDer, I have listening to Beethoven, Ninth Symphony with the Philharmonic of Berlin and Herbert von Karajan since 2003. Okay, it's 15 years of that thing in repeat while I'm doing the weekly review. If it
I
takes
love it.
two times, two times, three times, doesn't matter. It's not because I'm bored. It's exactly the other way around. The brain, as soon as the first three notes of that symphony comes, my brain immediately goes into weekly review. And I had a funny story is that my mother-in-law knew that I played that. She has seen me doing the weekly review. She didn't know what it was. So I went to visit and she got me tickets for the orchestra doing that. Okay. And I went and sitting there, with a tie because it was a formal event. And as soon as it started, the brain was like, and I was like, okay, pulled the phone and started downloading apps. And I did the week review with a
You
live
can't
orchestra.
not. Like, that's the thing. That's how you know you have a habit that's brilliant for two reasons. One, I'm going to get my brain science a little bit off here, but what's been shown is that when we look at order of emotional resonance and sort of habituation, it actually goes like smell, then hearing, then sight. It kind of goes with how we develop. So that's why strong smells can trigger people to be in a focus zone. And that's why if you smell something that came from an ex, it's like me and my ex used to always eat cinnamon rolls. Well, you walk around a Cinnabon, you're going to remember your ex. It has nothing to do with the cinnamon or with the rolls. It has that clustering, right? Sound is up there. Like if you hear sounds over and over again, which is why it's so like I love that you stacked and you primed your brain in that way and you stick to it. But I knew where that story was going, though. I was like, oh, he's not. So I mean, the thing about it is because I've had similar things happen. You cannot rest. Your brain cannot stop that once it starts going. So, Augusto, in a similar way, I have a morning routine that I do Monday through Friday. Certain teas that I drink, certain places that I sit, certain things that I listen to. And I have learned the hard way that I have to have a different weekend routine. I have to drink different teas, I have to sit in different places, because otherwise I'll wake up on that Saturday morning that's unscheduled
and work.
and then be like, oh, it's 2:00 in the afternoon. And I'm like, oh, crap. Like, how did I get here? I was just following that priming in that morning routine the whole way. And the brain was happy because that's what it does. It was easy. It knew what it was going to do. Now, whether Charlie was happy and my wife was happy with me,
That's a different story.
that's a completely different story. So yeah, we need those types of things. Just to round out, to not leave people hanging, the two other types of blocks are admin blocks, 30 minutes to an hour long. Why 30 minutes to an hour long? Most of us, after about an hour of doing pure admin and email, we're done, right? We're reaching the point to where we need to walk, we need to go do something else. So if you're planning on an afternoon to catch up with email, don't do that because you're going to spend an hour or so doing email and then 3 hours of doing social media or video gaming or whatever else because your brain is done. Actually, we talked about this. I don't think we give ourselves and our brains enough credit about how disorienting an experience email is. Think about it. You have 15 different emails you're trying to go to. That's 15 different people, likely 15 different topics, 15 different questions or so that you're trying to answer, different tones, moods, context. And your brain is having to do that super, super quick. Y'all,
Right.
That is the equivalent, the mental equivalent of doing circuit training, rapid circuit training at a gym for an hour, right? Where you're just going from machine and switching. Like that it's good for your body in a way, but it will wear you out, right? We do that to ourselves. So don't, please, please, please don't schedule that afternoon to get caught up on 2 weeks of email. You're far better off to schedule 2 30-minute to 1 hour blocks a day and just get through the high priority stuff and just work through it over the week. 1, you'll do it. 2, it's easier on your brain. The last, and this is probably the most underplanned and underappreciated type of block that most productivity folks don't put on their calendar. And Augusto, that's the recovery block. These are the lunches. These are the walks around the block. These are the, getting kitty and puppy snuggles, or, chasing your kids around the house, video games, conscious video games, conscious surfing that's letting your brain, body, and heart recover. This is one of those things that's changed, Augusto. Back when I started this way back in 2009, 2010, there was not a recovery focus block.
Mm-hmm.
It was just assumed that people would do what they need to do. People, including me. After years of coaching,
charge, by the way.
After coaching and teaching this for so long, I realized, you know what? People are not putting 30 minutes of lunch on their calendar. So they look at their calendar and mentally account for that being work and then end up being famished. They're not putting that recovery block after 2 focus blocks, which, by the way, you probably need. And so what they do is write their tails off for 3 or 4 hours, get up in a fog, and then jump into a meeting and then wonder why they can neither remember their writing nor what happened in the meeting, right? You have to have recovery blocks. So it's really this rule, y'all. Most people are like, how do I get more focus blocks, Charlie? Because that's when I get the work done, and work is valuable, and all those sort of things that are part of our culture. Usually what I want to say is, instead of thinking about maximizing your focus blocks, think about equalizing your recovery blocks. Meaning, if you're doing all of this high output work, but don't have time on your schedule for recovery and rejuvenation, you are inevitably on the road to burnout and less good work. That would be like waking up and running a marathon. I realize, I want to pause real quick. I realize I've used a lot of ableist metaphors here, running, exercising. So for those of you who can't, as much as I can understand that, it's just useful as a framework. So I just want to make that point there.
Right.
It would be the equivalent of just running that marathon or going whole hog day in, day out, day in, day out, and then wondering why you're burned out, frazzled, scattered, and tired 2 or 3 days later. Of course you are. Yeah. Productivity, the way I understand it, has to be centered and founded upon compassion, grace,
self-compassion,
right?
Grace.
Self-acceptance. Yep. All those types of things, because if it's just founded on working harder and getting more done is better, we live incomplete, malnourished lives. And that's not thriving.
I cannot agree with you more. I always say, productivity is not for you, it's for your future self. And think about that. But you made an important point on these blocks, and I agree with you 100% on that recovery one. And actually, when I do coaching, I tell people that's the first one you block. That's the first one you book. So if we get your 5 blocks, okay, 4, sorry, your 4 blocks, okay, and for the people who is listening, in which order should they begin that? So I agree with you. It's not about maximizing focus. It's about equalizing resting. I love that concept. But you have 4. So where or how, if you were to coach somebody right now to implement those blocks, how you will tell them to prioritize them? And given, I understand we are going to do a generic exercise. This change for person to person, obviously, as we have discussed all the call. But on generic terms, where would you tell them to focus first and second and third and so
on? The general answer, start with the one you need most. So if someone comes to me and like, Charlie, I'm exhausted, I just, burn out, scattered, I'm going to say, how about we start by programming the recovery blocks first? Because that's clearly what you need more of. What you're doing is probably maximizing your focus blocks. So let's not do that. If they come to me and they're like, Charlie, I'm lonely. Normally it takes a little bit of coaching to get to that reality. So people don't just show up to me out of the blue and be like, Charlie, I'm lonely, help me. That's not how it works. But what y'all see is, well, I'm not really connected to my work. Like I've lost some of that meaning and spark. And usually by the time it clicks down, it's like they're just not meeting with the right people. They're not in human relationships as much. And it's like, so maybe we slide in some social blocks and get you out of that creative cave for a while, right? If they come to me and they're like, Charlie, I can't get it done. I seem like I'm working all the time, but I'm not really getting anywhere. I was like, okay, we're going to need to optimize for focus blocks because probably most of your work are admin blocks, right? And so that would be the way that I would work through that. What I'll say here, my go-tos though, is looking at people's recovery blocks and looking at their focus blocks. Your focus blocks will determine how much work you can get done, which means how much in an ideal world, if you were practicing, you would plan against. Too many people look at their goals and look at what they want to do and then make BS plans for how they're going to get there without thinking about how much capacity they actually have. If most projects, this is a general rule that I've found, take 3 focus blocks per week to make meaningful progress on, and you have 3 focus blocks, that means you're going to make meaningful progress on one project. No matter what you plan, no matter what you do different, it's going to be one project. You putting 5 down that you're going to do does nothing but create a tool for you to cause suffering for yourself later on. So I focus on those 2 because usually what will happen is we'll reach some equilibrium. They'll see that they have wildly underestimated how much focus blocks things actually take to get done, and wildly overestimating how many they have per week, and discounting how many recovery blocks they need. And so it's like pulling down or getting real about how long things take, getting real about how much true capacity you have, and then getting real about how much rest and recovery they need. And once I get all of those 3 and sort of their balance for the person, that's how we sort of look at what their balance should look like. That's going to be different for different people. For instance, if you have a chronic disease or you have Crohn's or you have, all sorts of different things, I hate to say this and I say this with love, your capacity is just going to be less. That's what it means to have those chronic illnesses. And that's part of the suffering of having those chronic illnesses. You can't plan as if you had a level of capacity as if you didn't have that. So for me, that counts as a project. I have the 5 projects rule, no more than 5 active projects per time perspective. Not going to go too much into it. But if you have a chronic illness, that counts as one of those macro projects, just because of what it either takes to recover and maintain yourself, or because of the capacity that it takes from you. The sooner you embrace that, and I'll use the more spiritual word, surrender to that, the more you're going to find peace and be able to create plans and schedules and goals that you can achieve that will propel your life forward with less suffering.
And I love that. As a person who at some point in his life was 400 pounds and planned for, look, I should have the full power, and getting to surrender to that concept. As you said, no. If I don't do something about the 400 pounds and the energy that consumes to move and do as a 400-pound person, if I want to increase that, I was lucky, but it was a lot of work to get from those 400 pounds to 182 and discover how much difference or increase I get because of that energy. So yes,
yeah. Well, carrying it is a project. Getting back in shape or getting to 82 pounds is also a project. And so there come times in our life, and I'm sure you were there with that, is like, I get to choose which project I'm going to do. I'm going to choose maintaining where I am, and I don't want that, or I'm going to choose the hard work of, I'm sure that took several years to get to that point.
10 years.
Right? So congrats on doing that, because that's a huge milestone. So yeah, so it's which at a certain point, that's the choice that we have. Which of these projects am I going to choose? But not making a choice is also a choice, right?
And not making a choice is also a choice. Yes. So we're coming to the end of the interview. What message? I mean, I think this is full of tidbits. So I think, my advice is go back and start listening again. But what last message can they get from you, Charlie?
Start or recalibrate your productivity journey based upon your reality, and do so with compassion. Meaning, instead of just forcing yourself to choose this new habit or this new time blocking or task management or something, start with where you are and say, what do I need right now? Not what do I need to do, but what do I need? And then start layering up for there. Because if you just start with all the tips and techniques and strategies and goals, I'm afraid that you'll be on the path that many people are, where they're doing more, but living less. So live more.
And that's awesome. Where can people find you, get in contact with you, and get more about your products and Momentum and their books and everything else?
Yeah, so all roads lead back to productiveflourishing.com. If you want to check it out, you like some of the content, then you might like the book Start Finishing. We also have a great planner app that we're rolling out. It's currently in beta. So yeah, check me out on Productive Flourishing. If you're the Twitter type, I'm also at Charlie Gilkey.
Perfect. So this is continued watching the different videos on the Task Management and Time Blocking Summit 2022. Thank you very much, Charlie Gilkey, for sharing with us all this, and see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a great day.